please. I'm Alan Clark. I'm the soon-to-be Public Affairs Officer of this wonderful facility, the Dallas VA Medical Center. We want to welcome you all today and thank you all very much for coming. I'd like to give you a little bit of an historical background as to what this is all about today. And I'm quoting and reading from what President Ronald Reagan said on the 40th anniversary of D-Day at Omaha Beach. He said, when our Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy 40 years ago at that time, they came not as conquerors, but as liberators. When these troops swept across the French countryside and into the forests of Belgium and Luxembourg, they came not to take, but to return what had been wrongfully seized. When our forces marched into Germany, they came not to prey on a brave and defeated people, but to nurture the seeds of democracy amongst those who yearn to be free again. Today, in their memory, and for all who fought here, as he was stating then on Omaha Beach, we celebrate the triumph of democracy. We reaffirm the unity of democratic people who fought a war and then joined with the vanquished in a firm resolve to keep the peace. So that gives you the historical background for what this is all about today. We're celebrating the liberation of France in its totality for all of our veterans that participated, coming in from the south, coming in at Normandy on D-Day, or coming in to fight in the Battle of the Bulge, on land, on the offshore ocean, and the beaches, and over the airspace of France. So those are the men and warriors that we honor here today with the certificates to be presented. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Director of the VA Medical Center for his welcome greetings to you, Mr. Alan Harper.
Thank you, Alan, and it really is an honor and a privilege to have so many heroes with us today, and that's exactly what you all are. We appreciate your sacrifice and service to our country, and we're very, very proud to have you here today. We're especially proud to have the representative from the French government here to present certificates to you for your help in liberating France. And most importantly, I want to put out a plea to you that you all as veterans have earned the right to get your health care through the VA healthcare system. And I would encourage you that if you have not enrolled in the VA healthcare system, that you do so. We have our health screening team in the back that can get you enrolled right away. So take advantage while you're here today to do that, please. We would be very honored to provide your healthcare services. And lastly, I want to thank Alan Clark and Penny and all the hospital staff that put this together. Things like this don't just happen. It takes an awful lot of work, and I want to say thanks to Alan and all his crew. But again, we are very, very honored to have you today. We're very honored to have the French consul here with us today, and we're just delighted to have this program. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Al Gittleman, who is one of the mainstays of the 29th Infantry Division Association, that is the National Guard unit that went ashore on the beaches of Omaha on D-Day. Mr. Al Gittleman has 3 Purple Hearts from his service in World War II. We're proud to have him leading us in our Pledge of Allegiance. He was on our panel program a year ago. Immediately following the Pledge of Allegiance, Sharon Balthrop from our medical media staff will come and will lead us in singing the Star Spangled Banner, and then we will have the invocation after that. So if you would remain standing through the invocation if you can. I mean, you know, some of us are in wheelchairs, I realize that. If you don't want to stand, you don't have to. But if you would now render the proper honors for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Go salute the flag. Repeat with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we
invocation this afternoon will be led by Angelos Chavez, who was a Navy frogman at Utah Beach. He probably arrived on the beach 30 minutes before the 1st Infantryman of the 4th Infantry Division. The village of Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, which is the town which is right at Utah Beach, honored him as perhaps and probably in their belief and in my belief the first man on Utah Beach on June 6, 1944, and that community has named a street in honor of this man.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord God in heaven, we approach thy throne of grace with praise and love and thankfulness as we commemorate the 57th anniversary of D-Day, when the mightiest amphibious invasion of history was launched at Normandy. We seek thy blessings on all of us gathered here as we pay homage to God and country. We thank you profoundly for our victories on D-Day and in the Battle of Normandy. Our hearts are especially moved today to remember our fallen comrades, those 31,000 gallant Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice at Normandy. We also remember those fellow veterans whom you, as our supreme commander, has called to their final muster. May their memory be eternal. With special thanksgiving, we thank you for our country and the freedoms it provides, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We also thank you for the amity that exists and continues with France, our historic ally. Bless, we pray thee, thy servant Pierre Le Petit, the Consul General of France, who comes to us today with messages of gratitude from his grateful nation. Together we ponder in solemn memory those heroes, French and American, who sacrificed all of their tomorrows so that we could enjoy our todays in a free America and a liberated France. Grant them, Lord, restful repose in thy kingdom. Bless our country, our blessed country, the United States of America, et la France, nos alliés historiques. In the name of the Lord and our Redeemer we pray, amen.
Please be seated. Well, we could almost stop after that, right? What a great prayer. He's always the greatest. You can see why we ask him to invoke the blessings of the Almighty upon our assemblage. Before we get started on our panel, I would like to introduce at this time, without any full introduction by any means, because he will be introduced later, but the presence in our audience of the Consul General of the nation of France from Houston, who came here to make the presentations in part 2 of our ceremony today, Mr. Pierre Le Petit. I would like to point out that there are dozens of stories in this audience, okay? And there are other Army Air Corps people that would have stories that could be told today. Mr. Guy Hunter is here representing the Army Air Corps with an experience that he had on D-Day. We have experiences of many other people in the audience that would be appropriate to represent what happened at Utah Beach. But we do have an Army Corps of Engineers officer that was part of the support troops at Utah. And then we have a gentleman that represents the experience of the United States Navy, Mr. William Wellhoyt, and what the Navy was involved with that day. And then a gentleman that was an infantryman with the 2nd Infantry on day 2, D+1 of D-Day. So You know, like I say, there's dozens of other stories and dozens of other people that could be on the program also. We have to pick folks that can tell a representative story and anecdotes that we attempt to draw out for the purposes of this program. This is an historical event. We try to do these once a quarter. This is the 8th one that we will have had in 2 years. We try to bring our employees together, and of course in this case we have an awful lot of wonderful visitors that are here with their guests and so forth to receive the certificates, but it is mainly to educate and motivate our employees, to let them know about the first-hand experiences of the veterans that have served this nation and that we have the privilege of serving at this location. I'd like to start out with questions for Guy Hunter at the far end of the table. Guy's biography is in a very shortened fashion in your pamphlet for your agenda. But basically, I'd like to start by asking Guy, when did you first know of the final day of the invasion, Guy?
It would be a couple of days before, when we were restricted to base. There's no activity, no way to get off. If we got off, we were in trouble.
So about June 4th, just 2 days early, by the restriction, you knew that it was going to be pretty soon.
Yes.
Okay. So when you all were told that, Guy, what were your emotions that finally it was going to happen? What were the emotions you expressed?
Red, white, and blue blood.
Red,
White, and blue blood.
okay.
Patriotic.
All right. Would you raise your hand in the back if you can hear okay back there? Want to make sure that we're getting appropriate. Okay, good. All right. On your base, you and I chatted, Guy, and you told me about a group that you defined as the Filthy 13.
Yeah.
I'd like you to tell the audience what that was about.
The Filthy 13 were 12 Indians who had sworn never to take a bath until the invasion took place. Of course, they were stationed downwind from everybody else.
Were they a stick of paratroopers and we're going to be jumping?
Right.
With the 101st Airborne?
And the only way that they would accept anyone to command them was that commander had to whip each one of them individually.
Those are the kind of guys you want jumping over Normandy.
Right.
All right.
Fortunately, they were not on my airplane.
They weren't on your airplane, okay. They might have taken you with them, right? Okay. Describe your trip across the channel to the drop zone. And what time did you all leave your bases that morning?
We left Exeter, England about midnight. And crossing the channel, we were flying just over the water to avoid the detection by the German radar. When we reached the west coast of Sherbrooke Peninsula, we climbed to jump altitude for the troopers. As we were crossing the channel, the peninsula, it wasn't much longer before the red light came on, which meant every trooper had to stand up and hook up for their jump, with each man checking the one in front. Except the jump master then had to go check the last man in the stick and then return to lead the troops out. When the green light came on, the troopers immediately started jumping out the door. At the same time, the sky seemed to turn red from the ground fire. And in the midst of their jumping, one trooper fell, and he landed on his hands and knees. The following trooper kicked him in the rear end and got him out of the way. But then, by the time the last man in the stick jumped, this man that had fallen was up and rode the last man out the door. Up until that time, the paratroopers had been a real obnoxious group. But you know, you had to give them praise for the courage that they took to jump out that door and all the ground fire that was taking place.
When Guy and I were chatting about this the other day, he was telling me that at his current age, in his 8th decade of life, he was saying what a great respect he had for those paratroopers of the 82nd, the 101st that jumped that day into enemy territory and into the unknown land they were going to be touching base on. And he said today he has great respect and admiration for them. So that I kind of stuck on that. I said, well, what did you think then? And that's when he said, well, then I thought they were obnoxious. When I thought about Army paratroopers, about the attitude that it takes to have done those jumps on D-Day and to go out into the night sky like that. Your plane did not get hit, apparently, by anti-aircraft fire going or coming on that mission.
Apparently, ground fire did hit us, and it knocked out one engine, and the fragments pierced the neck of one of the radio operator.
So one of your 5 crew members was wounded on that run.
I have later learned that only 2 of the paratroopers died in that mission.
So the majority of your stick survived the mission.
Until later.
Yeah, and that was 101st Airborne?
101st Airborne is a company of engineers.
All right. And a stick is the group that jumps out of an aircraft. So a stick of paratroopers is the one that's on that plane and makes the jump.
14 men.
Okay, 14 men were in that stick. Describe your return flight. You described that. And, was there something relative to friendly fire I thought you mentioned? That day or the next day?
We were flying a supply mission for the troopers the next day. And standing between the pilot and the co-pilot, it was amazing to watch this tracer come up at you. But all of a sudden something came through the floor, and about the time I turned around, there was a hole bigger than my head in the top of the plane.
So you'd had a shot come all the way through the plane, bottom through the top.
It was an impact shell, apparently. And it didn't go off until it left the plane.
But that hit you over the channel or over Normandy?
That was over the Cherbourg Peninsula.
Over the Cherbourg Peninsula. Okay. Okay, that was where you came pretty close to injury on the next day after you dropped the paratroopers. And you started doing supply runs.
That was the second mission.
And so the Army Air Corps, after dropping the troops, then obviously you all began the resupply missions.
Supply missions, primarily. Until southern France invasion, we went to Italy to perform that mission by towing gliders.
Lynn Gillieu is our next presenter on the panel, and he was an Army Corps of Engineers person, so he represents a special segment of the support mission. You know, in the military, you know, there's a lot of pizzazz to being in infantry, as there should be and all, but you know, it takes a total effort to win our wars. It takes a lot of people out there in the support missions, and it takes the people all the way back in the supply chain. It takes people all the way back in the United States. And it takes the wives and the mothers and fathers and relatives back in the hometowns to be able to support our people. But I'd like to introduce Lynn at this time. And tell me, Lynn, about the preparation that your engineer company made for the Channel crossing and to get into Normandy.
I think it was about the middle of May that I was called to headquarters there in southern England and told that my company would be going ashore on D-Day, which was a little bit of a surprise because we had 66 large vehicles, and it would take a lot of transport to get us over. But the purpose for our going at this time was that we expected the Germans to open the dams in the Douve River and flood the area back of Utah Beach, which in fact they did. So things became rather tense, of course, when I got this word. And every day I would go up to a building that was separated from other buildings and heavily guarded, go into this building, and there was a 3-dimensional relief map, I guess you'd say, on the floor. Every day P-38 aircraft flew the coast taking pictures, and they would come back and change anything on this relief that had changed, fortifications, seawall, etc. I could not tell my men at that time, it was much later, like 2 weeks later, before I could tell them what their mission was. They separated us into LCT, that's landing craft tank. That's a flat-bottom boat about 100 feet long for the crossing. Separated our people into landing units, and we were on 21 different craft. I kind of lost control of the unit, of course, and we all got on the craft. But there was some harrowing moments when the shells started falling. Some of the craft were hit. Of course, I didn't know whether it was one of ours or not. Luckily, none of them were hit. One of them sunk, 2 got lost and ended up on Omaha Beach, but otherwise we made it.
You were the commanding officer of what kind of a company?
Engineer Treadway Bridge Company.
Tell me, just tell the audience quickly what a treadway bridge company was supposed to do in combat?
Primarily it was floating equipment, but we also bridged dry gaps that had been blown in the road like culverts. We had 864 feet of bridging scattered out over 36 large trucks. And this bridge was capable of handling the 40-ton tanks. And we bridged every major river in France except the Seine, and we got to cross that on someone else's bridge. That included the Douve near the beach, the Rhine, the Moselle, the Saar, the Marne, and many, many others.
When you got to the beach that morning, and I think you hit the beach, as I recall it, 09:30 hours, and what was the condition? How would you describe the condition of the beach at that time?
The seawall in my area had not been blown, and the seawall, if I remember correctly, was about 5 feet high at that point. There was sand built up against it, and the vehicles were starting to pile up in that small area between the seawall and the water's edge. And another unit was supposed to blow a hole in the wall, and they did eventually, but our reconnaissance unit, which went in with the second wave of the infantry, had reported back that there indeed had been a blown bridge on codenamed Road U5. It was about 3/4 of a mile, as I recall, from the beach. So we were waiting to get through the seawall to go bridge this gap, and the infantry was crying for anti-tank guns inland, which was the 4th Infantry Division. So we got enough men around to pick up jeeps over our head and push them over the seawall. Then we'd pick up the anti-tank gun. The jeep was to tow, push it over the wall, and hook it up and head for the front. When they blew the seawall, 2 of our trucks were the first ones through, as I recall. We had to turn them around and back down the road to this blown bridge, which is about 3/4 of a mile. And there was a soldier waiting at the intersection to keep other vehicles from coming in and blocking us. We got down to this blown culvert, and one of the duck tanks, that was the amphibious tanks, had made its way down there and had been blown up near the bridge site. They were still shooting at it with artillery. We managed to get the bridge in, and as we were pulling away from the area, got back up to the road intersection where this soldier was holding traffic. I jumped off the truck and ran up to tell him the roadway was open. When he turned around, it was General Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, as some of you know, was the assistant division commander of the 4th Infantry Division. He had gone in with either the first or the second wave of the infantry.
And I would point out historically that General Roosevelt died within a few days, not from wounds apparently, but illness, perhaps a heart attack. And he's buried in the cemetery at Normandy. If any of you visit the American cemetery at Normandy, he was a recipient of the Medal of Honor, and he's buried in that cemetery there. I'd like to just ask you one more question, Lynn, then I'm going to go to Bill, and it relates to the Douve. You mentioned the Douve bridges that you put together. What was the significance once you got across, put your equipment across that bridge for the crossing?
The Douve River flows into the channel between Omaha and Utah beaches. And there was no land connection between Omaha and Utah because the town of Carrington had not fallen to the Americans. And it didn't fall for several days. So we were rushed to get a bridge across, which we got in on June the 10th. The tide there is about 13 feet. And this was a little different than what we had experienced on the Colorado River in California, the Sabine River between Louisiana and Texas. So the bridge had to float at 13 feet below the maximum height, and half of it was on a mud flat when the tide was out, and had about 18 inches of water over the bridge when the tide was in. That bridge stayed in, I believe, about 5 or 6 weeks. We put 6,500 vehicles across it. The town of Carrington fell, which gave us the land connection in between the 2 beaches.
And I think that's a significant thing to recall, is that this bridge company doing that bridging is what allowed there to be traffic connecting the two beachheads for the first time for the battle. I'd like to ask William Wilhoit a few questions next. Once again, his biography is in there. I'd like to talk to him about the Navy aspects of these LCTs that we've already heard mentioned. Before I do ask the first question here to William, I would point out that Bill brought a flag that was on his LCT. It's sitting back here on the floor if you all would like to see that. That's the flag that you can describe anything that I didn't say. And I would point out something very significant about Bill, and that is the fact that he was awarded the Navy Cross, which is the second highest decoration for gallantry in action for the U.S. Navy. Bill, I'd like to let you tell us what these LCTs are and what was its role in the D-Day operation and your involvement, please.
LCT stands for Landing Craft Tank. It's approximately 112 feet long and 32 feet wide, flat bottom, powered by 3 marine diesel engines. The main feature of it is an open deck right down the center. And in the bow is a ramp that wards the sea off when you're crossing. But then that ramp drops, and it's wide enough for a Sherman tank to go through. And on either side of the deck, there are quarters for the 16-man crew and the other facilities that you need, a galley and a head. And the whole thing's run from a pilot house that's on the starboard side, just above one of the crew quarters. One of the oddities about it is it anchors in the rear. Most ships have an anchor that's dropped in the front that looks pretty when it's an anchor because it always has its bow into the wind. Not on LCT. It's got its anchor in the back, and so when it rides an anchor, it's backwards from everything else. These are not pretty boats, but extremely effective in what they're designed to do, and very durable. They were compartmentalized to the point where they were virtually unsinkable. And thank gosh for that in my case. The role that we were to, I mentioned one thing. The thing drew only about 4 inches of water in the bow and about 4 feet in the stern, so that you could run up on a beach and you drop your ramp and you virtually were able to put vehicles onto a beach dry. They didn't have to go through the water. And this anchor in the back, I've got to say one more thing about it. It was a dual purpose thing. One was to keep you in the traditional use of an anchor. The other was to use it when you were approaching a beach. As you got close to the beach, you dropped the anchor in the back and played out the cable, so that when you got on the beach, you got your equipment off, then you just took up on the cable and it pulled the boat back off. A little bit like picking yourself up by your own bootstraps, I guess, but it seemed to work. The role we had was twofold. We were loaded in Portland Harbor in southern England near Weymouth with the first real heavy equipment that was to be landed on Omaha Beach. We had bulldozers, half-tracks, jeeps, that sort of thing. It might have been a couple of your lost bulldozers, I don't know. But once we got those onto the beach, our job was then to go to the deep water area where the ships were and have them unload more cargo and reinforcements and whatever the Army needed onto our deck, and then we would take that into the shallow water and back onto the beach. So we had the two.
How much warning did you all have that you knew that D-Day was going to be the 6th of June? When did you know that the invasion was a go?
Well, actually, it was on the at 3:30 a.m. on the 5th. We were told first that we were going to go on the 4th, and the invasion was going to occur on the 5th. And we actually sorted from Portland Harbor at 3:30 a.m. And we sailed along the southern coast of England until mid-morning, and that's when it was decided by the headquarters that the weather was a little too rough on the French beaches, and so they postponed it for 24 hours. We turned around, went back to Portsmouth, re-anchored, and then at 3:30 on the 5th.
Tell me about that first run that you made into the beach and what transpired for your first run into the beach.
my wave was due to reach the beach at H plus 60 minutes. There were supposed to be lanes cut through the obstacles and cleared of mines and that sort of thing. When we got there, the Army was pinned down pretty bad on Omaha, and the wave formed up. There were 8 LCTs in the wave. 5 were to go to Easy Red Beach and 3 to Fox Green. And as we started in, we began to notice artillery fire in the water. So we buttoned up. We went inside of the pilot house and were able to steer through just little slits through the steel. We didn't know it because we were buttoned up, but the other ships in the wave began to take hits. And most of them, all of them actually turned away and headed back out. But then the concentrated fire occurred toward us, and we, in rapid succession, we got hit 9 times. One of the shells, I don't know where in the middle because it was ultra confusion, but it hit the pilot house itself. I was the second in command, and the hit on the pilot house killed the commanding officer. We were able to pull together enough people to operate the boat, to steer it, and it's all controlled. The engines were controlled out of the pilot house. And about the time we all got back on our feet, knowing where we were actually on the beach. So we had an opportunity to be the first ship to land vehicles on the beach. I found the telephone that communicates to the engine that operates the ramp, which is 100 feet down the deck. And I kept yelling into it, drop the ramp, and nothing happened. It didn't go. It seemed to me like about 5 years passed right then. But in all honesty, it was probably 15 seconds. And I made a decision that there's no point in sitting here. We were now on fire. Both guns were wrecked. We were taking casualties at a terrible rate. So I gave the command back to the vessel out. And we turned and went out. I imagine the enemy thought that we were kind of hopeless because we were burning all over. And maybe they took mercy on us and quit shooting. I don't know. But we got away from the beach all right.
Well, define your cargo, the troops and the cargo that you had.
Well, as I say, we had 2 bulldozers with trailers, and they were to go to a combat engineer company somewhere. And the rest was, I think we had 3 half-tracks with trailers and 4 or 5 Jeeps. Okay, and they were members of a headquarters unit of some.
Did you have any line units of troops? Okay.
No, they were not.
Okay, but all the men that would be driving those were on the LCT.
And some of the guys were apparently members of this headquarters unit.
Right. So you went back into the channel and then you returned and dropped that same load? Well,
I got permission to go to a hospital ship. We were covered and wounded. So I got that over the radio and sought out a hospital ship, unloaded our wounded, and headed back. They told me, go in. So I went back to what we call the line of departure, and that is the point at which you leave somebody else's control and you're on your own. When I got there, they told me that our wave had not yet gotten into the beach. It was still circling. The ones that had turned back, and they had told me to join them. So I did, and we circled for a while, and my understanding is that they were waiting to decide whether to abandon the beach or not and move the effort to Utah.
Yeah, on a historical basis, apparently the story is that about noontime, General Bradley was under a significant decision to make, and that was to whether to continue to go into Omaha with all the heavy casualties and the heavy fighting that was going on there and the lack of being able to break through and bring everybody around to Utah Beach. So that's part of what was going on in the bigger picture at that time.
Well, it winded up, the question up there. At that point, they had cut 5 lanes through the obstacles. And we were told just to pick a lane and take the cargo in, which we did. And On this run, fortunately, there was no artillery. We got a little bit of small arms fire, but we were able to get our cargo, get the troops off.
At what point in this time, when did you receive your wound, Bill? Was it on the first run that didn't drop it, or the second run?
It was on the first run when the pilot house was hit.
Okay, so you'd been wounded, and so you stayed with the LCT back for the second run, right? Okay. I'd like to go and ask some questions of Louis Whitcower now. Louis was a company commander of an infantry company, and he, like I said before, on D-Day +1, he took a company of infantry of the 2nd Infantry Division onto the beach. How long did your company train together before going into Normandy, Louis?
Well, that's a difficult question because it started actually training back before in the 30s and from the 40s, but the unit was constantly being levied on for cadres for other divisions that were being formed, and the men had to be replaced, and we kept getting replacements. Initially, the company started out with Texas and Oklahomans, but we got large number of men from Pennsylvania and Ohio. So basically, each time we'd get an infusion of men, you'd start off on your training a little bit. Most of the men had been training, say, a good 2 years.
And within the company you commanded,
You're right.
had been together for 2 years in England?
Oh, no. We went over in October of 43, spent about 8 months in Ireland, and then we went to Cotentin after the debacle of the 28th Division. They were pulled out. They were supposed to go in our place, and we were put in their place as the backup division.
Did you have any of your company commanders that had been in combat before the beachhead?
No.
So you all were fresh troops
Fresh.
coming in. Okay.
Raring to go.
What were your emotions during the Channel crossing? And I guess were you in one of those LCTs?
Yes. It's quite a good ship. We had 222 men in the rifle company, and the H company of the 38th Infantry, about 168 men were there. So they'll take about 400 men and 10 tanks, I believe. But it's real interesting to ride one of those, and we were very lucky we were able to get a dry landing. And Alan, if I could tell this now, I came down off of the George S. Silence on I call it a cargo net, was just thrown over the side, and in the LCT, I went up to the pilot house and introduced myself, and the captain of the craft asked me where I was from. I said, Texas. He said, well, great. He says, Texas, I'm from Galveston. He said, I'm going to try to give you a dry landing. And we took off. What was funny, he asked me where I wanted to go. I told him, well, don't you know? He said, no. So I knew that I was to land at beach entrance number 4, which is actually on the map, says beach exit E3, which was at the Colville Road, and that's where I had him drop us off, and he did give us a dry landing. He maneuvered that thing, and it sounded like he was trying to just tear the beach up, getting in there, but we got a dry landing, and we'll always be appreciative that he was a Texan and I was from Texas.
What did you see on the way inland right after you were dropped on the beach?
Well, there was some firing to our right, and I think this is the pillbox that was firing. Luckily, the aperture was so that it couldn't get over as far as we were, and it kept going off to the right. But the adrenaline kicked in, and it didn't take us long to get off of that beach and get on top of the hill.
What was happening to the schedule for the beachhead, the expansion of the beachhead, and where it was on D+1 and where it was supposed to have been?
Well, during our briefing in Wales and Carmarthen, we were briefed about 10 days before the invasion that we were to go into a transit area in a little town called Colville-sur-Mer, and actually we weren't to become operational until D+4. Well, the initial schedule was, as I recall it, was that the first day the troops were to make 5 miles inland, second day 9 miles, and the third day would be 13 miles in. Well, as I was moving down the Colville Road, I looked over to my right and I saw the command post sign for the 26th Infantry of the 1st Division, and they were supposed to have been 5 miles down the road. And I thought something was wrong at that time.
You linked up with your battalion commander. You want to just mention that anecdote, Lewis?
Well, I got to tell you about the MP that I met. Before I do that, we were going down the Colville Road and got up to the wide where it turned off to go to Colville. And I got there and I saw this MP. I halted the company and walked over to him, asked him if he knew where the 2nd Division was. He said, no, he just kept digging. And I said, well, do you know, are you my guide? Are you supposed to take me into Colville to the transit area? No, he just kept digging. The last thing I asked him, I said, well, do you know if Saint Laurent has been taken? Because that was my alternate to take the company to Saint Laurent. And he said, well, I hear it's been taken. So I thanked him very much, and he was still digging. So I turned and went down the Cassini, the road from Colville down to Cassini, which goes through Saint Laurent, and got to the well and happened to look up, and there was my battalion commander. Normally, I always thought he didn't like me too much. He didn't particularly care for me, but that day I was like a long-lost brother, bringing him his first company for his command.
Tell us a story about the Russian snipers.
Well, they're characters. We deployed. Yeah, let me take it out. We deployed across that road leading up to Formini, which was our next stop. And during the night, right after that plane that always flew over about midnight and brought all the fire from the ships, that was something to see. You talk about fireworks. No fireworks display has ever equaled that. Some of you may recall that plane that used to come over about midnight and all the ships would open up with their anti-aircraft weapons. Well, right after that, we started getting sniper fire. They weren't hitting anybody. So just about the time it got light, I sent the 2 of my scouts and 1 squad up to see if they could locate these snipers. Sure enough, in about 30 minutes, they came back and they had 2. They were Russians who were impressed into the German army with that 352nd Division. The 352nd Division was a great nuisance to us, we admit that, but they were not German soldiers, they were impressed Russians. And I have to tell this, but my second in command wanted to take him out and shoot him, but I told him if he didn't get those men back to Battalion S2, I was going to shoot him. But his name was Windy, and you can imagine the type of fellow that he was.
Tell me about your action in which you got hit and then your medevac, Lewis.
Well, when we crossed the IP in Formini going to Trevieres, my mission had been assigned was to take the bridge over the Aure River, A-U-R-E, however Frenchman can tell me. But we were supposed to seize the bridge and hold it until the rest of the regiment could pass through. Somehow, about 1,000 yards before we got into Trevieres, the 1st platoon was fired upon, and they turned to the right. And I've never figured out why Mike turned. His mission was to go straight ahead and take that bridge. Matter of fact, I've got some pictures of that place, and it doesn't look like I imagined it at the time. But at the time, there were 8 men in the 1st platoon that were actually killed in action. I can't tell you in what order or anything. There were 9 that were wounded in that same action, so And the platoon leader was seriously wounded, Frank Mikan, who was from Pennsylvania and a great officer. That's 17 men that were wounded in that one action. And apparently, the fact that we had never had any training during our entire time about hedgerows, Frank's platoon got trapped. They tried to go down the middle between the hedgerows, and the machine guns were set up on the flanks, and as they got in the center of the place, they were hit by those machine guns. Well, after I got some artillery fire going, and the Navy did show up, and I haven't been able to determine off of what ship they were, but there was a naval shorefire control party landed and came up and wanted to know if I could use any help. I told them I could use all the help I could get. But they started firing some very heavy weapons off of some of the ships in the bay. I think Trevier is about 10 miles. But I made an attempt to go up and see what the problem was with the 1st platoon. I got the 3rd platoon going down on the right flank, and I got the 2nd platoon going down on the left flank. And about that time, I was in the wrong place, and machine guns caught me with a couple of bursts. I had 2 very brave men, a medic from Casimir Ora from Wisconsin, and an Indian fellow from Oklahoma who was my #1 scout. And they came down under heavy fire and rescued me and brought me out. And after a little consultation, getting the exec up to take over the company, they put me in one of those bouncy ambulances and took me back to the airfield. Well, there was a collection hospital right on the beach. And the next morning, I was flown out to England.
There was a story there that I wanted you to mention, Lynn, about when you completed the 2nd bridge at the Moselle. You had a relatively high-ranking officer that visited your unit a little bit later.
Yeah, he was pretty high, all right. It's General Patton. We had a terrible time getting across the river. It's flooded, and the infantry is having a lot of trouble and couldn't get the artillery and the mortar fire lifted. But we finally got a bridge across. The roadway leading down to the bridge was covered with 58 inches of water. And so we were building sections of bridge up in the town and taking it down the road with a power boat. Finally got the bridge in, started putting vehicles across when the water receded to some degree. And I went back up the hill to where the company headquarters was and laid down on the ground, pulled a tent half over me. It's raining, of course, it always is. And immediately fell asleep because I'd been up a while, like 72 hours. I'd been asleep about 2 hours. The first sergeant woke me up and said the bridge has been hit by artillery fire and is destroyed. And I often said that's the worst moment of my life, but I got up and went back down to the river. We started ferrying. We built ferries and started ferrying tanks, tank destroyers, etc. across the river. And finally got enough bridge equipment assembled and started a 2nd bridge. Just as we got it finished, there were some high-ranking officers there that were pacing the ground and said there were 7 miles of vehicles waiting to cross, to hurry, of course. So just as we completed the bridge, and I said, bring on your vehicles, I looked across, and here came a scout car down this one-way road we had bulldozed on the far side of the little town of Malling. And I went screaming across the bridge because that would block these vehicles from going up this one-way road. The scout car stopped, and out of it came a helmet with 3 stars on it. It's General Patton. My first thought was, I guess I'll get rest and relaxation in the brig in England. And that didn't sound too bad at that point. The general got out, told his driver to get the vehicle out of the way. Came over and put his arm on my shoulder and told us we'd done a great job. He stayed about 15 minutes. He was telling me the situation inland, the tactical situation, and then he left. That was my encounter with the general.
There have been some encounters with General Patton that have been a little bit more stressful, as you can imagine, through the years, and all of us have probably heard of them. I always have less time than I plan and hope to have for all the Q&A, but I would like to ask each of the four of you to close with your response to this question, and that relates to what can you say to the younger generations of Americans? I mean, we have young people that are on our staff, obviously, and just the young people of America relative to your service and what it meant and what your service in World War II meant. Start with you, Guy.
I think it's a difficult question, particularly regarding the younger people. But I would think it would be best to ask them to try to devote a little more patriotism to the country. Because sometimes I see situations when there's no respect whatever. And if I open my mouth, I'm in trouble. So, all I can say is I don't think I could ever regret the time that I spent in the service, because I have developed many friends, and in recent reunions have experienced great concern for each and every person that I ever served.
Thank you, Guy. Lynn, would you like to answer that question, please?
I agree with Guy. I'd like to say also that every one of my generation I feel like is one of my comrades. And when I approach one of them, they seem to return in favor. So I'd like to say it really does pull you together. And second thing I might mention is I'm very concerned about the preparedness of our country. I know that quite often we say we don't have a real enemy, but I can remember too well how many, well, not the numbers, but I saw many men die because our tanks were not equal to the Germans. A lot of our other equipment was not either, especially at the beginning of the war. So I think we should all push to be ready, whatever might happen to us in the future.
Thank you, Lynn. William?
That's really a tough question. I have great respect for the young people. A little different from most. I believe that inside of them is still a love of country and a love of doing the right thing that maybe our institutions are not tapping like they should. We were all products of a depression, and we knew what deprivation was. And we were also told to recite the Pledge of Allegiance every morning in assembly at school. And patriotism and the willingness to overcome hardships is just part of our generation's life. We've gone through a long period now of plenty, and young people are, I think, accustomed to getting things that we could only dream of. I hope that seed of patriotism is there, and God forbid that they're ever asked to raise a 11 million man army and go off to fight somewhere. But if ever they are asked to, I hope that they will respond. I don't know anything else.
That's enough. Thanks a lot. Okay, Lewis. Thank you.
Well, I think I would ask every young person, where in the world would you go to get more freedom than you do in America? You get more opportunities than you do. Don't worry about whether the government provides everything for you, but remember, it's like defending your mother. If somebody attacks your mother, they're in trouble. You got to defend America and keep America free, keep America going strong as we have. We can't give up on encourage our patriotism in our young people.
I'd like to introduce Cecil Gilliam, is a very dedicated and volunteer here in the spinal cord injury. He was a veteran and will be receiving one of the certificates today. He's just one of the neatest people around, and I'd like him to make our closing remarks on behalf of the assemblage today.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I, as a veteran and one who uses the services of Dallas VA Hospital, would like to ask all the employees of the Dallas Veterans Affairs Center to please stand so we, the veterans present, can thank you for a job well done. Would all the employees stand?
Most of them are standing already because there weren't enough chairs.
And to the Veterans Affairs North Texas Healthcare System, Mr. Harper, our director, and your staff, we thank you for holding these forums. They are informative, enlightening, educational, and foster better relations and understanding for your staff and we the veterans, and we thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, this is what's going to happen next. I'm going to make a couple of closing remarks here, and then we will end with the singing of God Bless the USA, led by Sharon again. At the termination of that song, nobody's going to say anything else. You got about a 5-minute break. Any of y'all that need to go out to the facilities, they're like down that hall there to the left, down this hall to the right, down here to the right and left. And so there's plenty around, but we only got about 5 minutes. Our employees, we thank you all very much for coming. I know that many of you need to get back to work. Obviously, all the people in the middle here are either people receiving certificates or they're guests for the most part. And so the second part of our program, after about a 5-minute intermission, will be the presentation of the certificates by our special guests today. I would like to close with these remarks. They're also quoted a quote from what President Ronald Reagan said. Far be it from me to do better than a presidential speechwriter in 19, you lose the decades, whatever it was. Whatever that was, 84, okay? You know, when you get into your 6th decade, such as I, and close to the 7th, you start to lose track of the decades. What he said that day at Omaha Beach at the ceremony also was, today, and this is what we are, the living here assembled, officials, veterans, citizens, are a tribute to what was achieved here 40 years ago. The land is secure. We are free. These things are worth fighting and dying for. Through the words of another individual that was there that day, he talked about another D-Day veteran, a private that was on the beach, and he talked about the meaning of it more than anything else. But it's enough to say about that private and all the men of honor that we honor today, I say here parenthetically, and courage, who fought beside each other those 4 decades ago. We will always remember. We will always be proud. We will always be prepared so that we may always be free. And that's what you men did for us and for the country of France and for the world at that time. Thank you. Sharon?
I am one of those spoiled, rotten kids. I cannot tell you what an honor it is to be here amongst you, these two. I'm not sure I can sing. It truly is an honor to serve you as we work here at the VA, and I think I can speak for all the staff, that we have the privilege to choose to work here because of what you did. We have the freedoms to worship, to have our families, to do so many things because of what you gave and how you lived your lives. So I want to say thank you in a big way, and to honor you as I sing this song from my heart, to ask God's blessings on the USA and each and every one of you in this room. with just my family in the strife. I'd thank my God above to be living here today, 'cause that flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, from New York to LA, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say, and I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget those people who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. God bless the
Okay, intermission time.